know what I'm supposed to say. Except don't go. Got my heart way up real high. Vocabulary running low. Out of breath, I keep going and going. Oh no. If I'm a record, then
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us again for one of our conference presentations. Really excited about this one. Very excited about our sponsor for the entire show this year, which our presenting sponsor is CPS. And thank you to Comet Science, who is our conference sponsor, and then thank you to RSM, who is our leading this presentation. So very excited about this. Supply chain special report, very timely, very important to what we all do in manufacturing. And now I'd like to introduce Casey Chapman with RSM, who's going to lead the discussion on this. Casey?
Good afternoon, and thank you for showing up for this. This is my name's Casey Chapman, and I lead our supply chain advisory practice here at RSM. RSM's a global professional services firm focused on the middle market. So think, supply chain, technology, audit, tax, that kind of stuff. And we recently had a very considerable effort for a middle market survey to supply chain professionals. And the survey was really intended to uncover what are the priorities of somebody in an organization in the middle market that's really focused in supply chain, hopefully making decisions in supply chain, to just kind of inform, from our perspective, inform what we want to do from a thought leadership perspective, but also just, to inform the market. So where I want to, this is my first time presenting this, so bear with me, but I want to have, I'm going to introduce Mark Ludwig here in a little bit. He is also with us to talk about trade and tariffs, just given the, that the prolific need in the market around understanding how to navigate the tariffs that are out there right now, and some strategies around that. And then Pat Lonsdale will also be our moderator as we switch from this overview of the supply chain report to a industry panel. We've got some great industry panelists here to take some Q&A, and then afterwards we're going to open it up for questions from the group here, probably the last 15 minutes or so. So the survey was issued back in March, and if you look at that timing, as you think about that, that's right in the middle of a lot of pending tariff issues and some that had already happened back in February in terms of the increase to kind of that 10% baseline number. The survey was largely sent to supply chain decision makers in the US and in Canada. We do, RSM has a lot of presence in Canada, so we wanted to make sure to include Canada. The interesting part about this survey is it really wasn't targeted to any one particular industry. So and keep that in mind as we as we review these results. It's not just manufacturers, it's not just industrial companies. It's going to be a blend of all industries, including potentially even services companies. So when you think about supply chain, think about it in that context. Some of these questions, and I'll point it out as we go, some of the questions may not be relevant for certain types of industries either, so you may get a little bit of a skewed answer to some of these things. In terms of size of the companies, you can see we do try to target that middle market, which in broadly speaking here, we've got a large number of respondents in that $10 to $500 million revenue range, and then if you think about a bell curve from there, going both directions, we've picked up companies all the way down to 10 million and up to $1 billion. So pretty broad survey. And some high-level findings, and we'll review each of these in a little bit of detail, but 62% of respondents essentially said that their organization was very effective at managing inventory. So given a choice of a number of different areas of focus for a supply chain manager or an executive to respond to the survey, they said on a sliding scale, we're pretty good at managing inventory. Where we need some help is not just in one area. Sustainability stuck out a little bit, probably because of the context of the tariffs, where organizations are trying to think, all right, how do I add agility, take the risk out of my supply chain? So sustainability was obviously skewed up a little bit in this survey, but I think the interesting takeaway here is that there was not just one thing that stuck out as a priority for supply chain managers. It was many things that were relatively equally rated. So when you think about inventory, maybe rises to the top, sustainability there, but some of these other things that are very prevalent in terms of needs in the middle market, and hopefully some of you can relate to this. Just in terms of inventory management, it will be a focus in the next 12 to 24 months, even though most respondents did say, hey, we're pretty good at this. It's still going to be a high priority for the organization to put some rigor around improving inventory management, as well as profit visibility, which from my perspective, I see that on a regular basis in our client base is the struggle to see not just the profit, but just straight, the product level costs. Costing is a constant need in this space, and the ability to get to those margins, not just at a product level, which leads to decision making, being able to make strategic decisions around SKU rationalization or pricing or make buy decisions, et cetera. It's also informing customer level rationalization. So you think about those margin analytics across different dimensions, whether it's product or customer, potentially a sales channel. So you think about wholesale, retail, OEM, aftermarket, these types of channels that oftentimes organizations have, or geography. That's powerful information that at the end of the day all comes back to that profit visibility, comes back to improving costing, understanding, and really that gross to net understanding around revenue. So that'll be a huge focus. The last one is risk management. And largely speaking, that again, I think ties back to that sustainability angle at the top where, if I'm taking a survey, I could see, all right, well, that's a big deal, sustainability. I need to manage my supply chain risk because I'm seeing a lot of headwinds with tariffs. I'm seeing ever increasing compliance requirements. So risk management is definitely an area of focus as well. So again, not one thing, but many things are on the minds of your supply chain decision makers out there. So in terms of evaluating processes, I thought some of these were pretty interesting because it is, from my perspective, sitting where I sit and dealing with a number of organizations, in supply chain, I often see the worst. We're being called in to fix things. So when you see these types of really high numbers, it's a little bit, it catches me by surprise because these are often things that are needs out in the market that we're helping to solve. So, the one that sticks out the most to me in this entire survey as being a little bit of a head scratcher is that first bullet, because 93% of the respondents said, hey, we've got data that I think is accurate and good. And I would say, that's interesting, but that's not. I could see an organization saying that and just, hey, we've got good data. We struggle with what to do with it, especially if I'm in that role. But I think a lot of if we were to quiz 100 CEOs or CFOs with that same question, I tend to think the answer would be different. I think data is actually a challenge for most organizations, especially in the middle market, because you have a number of disparate data sources, multiple sources of truth. I think the evolution of that is occurring every day where folks are investing in technology, investing in data in terms of bringing in the people with the right expertise to really set the strategy and move the organization towards being data driven. But that's an interesting response, and I think if we broke that down by respondent and revenue size, I think it would be pretty interesting to see the divergence around that. 91% agreed they need to invest in technology. I think that shouldn't be a surprise to most folks. Technology continues to be moving at 100 miles an hour, and we're all trying to keep up. A lot of that is around AI, which 88% mentioned AI. AI is something that I see a need in the market. I see clients that are moving towards that direction, particularly as they get larger. Our $1 billion plus clients are already using or exploring AI. In fact, I was in a client conversation last week with a large consumer products company that makes dog food. That's a $1 billion company, and they have their own internal AI team thinking about generative AI to think about, talking about, hey, if I want to know, ask a question such as, I need to understand what are alternative sources of this particular ingredient, it can go out and answer that question. If there's a supply chain challenge on the procurement side, you can ask questions around manufacturing lead times as well to customers, and et cetera. And it's certainly very interesting where that's going. And I think the most pervasive use case I've seen that just seems to be there every time is really around demand and supply planning. So demand planning, you see it embedded into these software tools that organizations are using. That's usually the first place AI is deployed into a manufacturing company, is in that demand planning or on that supply planning side. And sometimes we're even creating our own AI models using machine learning to really put in a very specific to the organization, using models in Azure machine learning to run those sorts of predictive demand types of tools. So I think AI is, and just broadly technology, is definitely here to stay. In terms of where organizations start, it actually starts with that first bullet. You can't do anything without good data and then the governance around it, and making sure that if you are using an AI tool, obviously you don't want your data out there in the ether where folks can get to it, because most of the time when you're using these tools, you're usually putting it on top of a data set that is essentially your organizational data, customers included, products included, so pricing included, right? So that's high risk, and you want to make sure these organizations, the first thing they do, they make sure the data is consistent and usable, and that they have the right data governance and organizational governance around using these things. They can be very powerful, but it needs to be done very carefully. Tariffs, like I mentioned at the beginning, and we've got a booth out here, and it's the topic for sure of the day, of the month, of the quarter. It is certainly causing a lot of uncertainty in the market, and a lot of challenges for a lot of organizations. That said, it's not necessarily negative for everyone. So, and I want to point that out, because sometimes that gets lost. We have a number of organizations in the survey and in our client deck that actually this is a positive thing for them, right? If you have a domestic supply chain, this is an opportunity for you to gain market share. We've had a number of opportunities with our clients where we're helping them identify where in the market they can where they can play to kind of gain that market share against their competitors that do have foreign-based supply chains. So that is going on, and there is an opportunity there. You'll see 24% said no impact. Again, I think that's a combination of organizations that are not product-based. As I said, these are all industries in this survey, and also folks that just probably don't realize that even though you have a domestic supply chain, it doesn't mean the tariffs don't impact you. And in terms of the impact to your raw materials, it's just economics, right? More demand will be on the same supply base here in the U.S., so you're going to see those prices go up as well. So one thing that I would point out too here is around tariffs that I think is interesting is the the challenge a lot of companies here recently have had around identifying whether or not a price increase from their suppliers is a valid price increase. That seems to be coming up pretty much every day at this point. And that's not an easy thing to figure out. I can tell you, we have some techniques that we're using this it's actually an AI tool that we use that we can see secondary and tertiary suppliers and where that product's coming from, but that doesn't tell you what item's being bought and what tariff is on it. You can make some guesses and get a rough order of magnitude for reasonableness. But that is a challenge in the market right now is what should that price increase be? And I think putting processes around and trying to predict, what that, not that primary supplier, but that impact from secondary and tertiary suppliers will be to who you're buying from today is something that is worthwhile. And I'm seeing some of our clients get ahead of that by building some. Most organizations already have an impact analysis of some variety to the tariffs, but this is sort of that next step of that analysis. What's my exposure? Well, this is part of that exposure analysis. The regulatory landscape was high on folks' list too as a area of focus for the next year. Again, like I said at the beginning, there's a number of topics that are all kind of relatively the same importance, around that 50 to 55% mark. This is one of them. And, we in the green box, you can see several regulatory compliance topic areas that are out there right now that companies are dealing with. But there's obviously a lot of governmental compliance requirements as well as just straight, customer requirements that are out there that might as well be regulatory. And, organizations are definitely investing in technology to help with the compliance around that. As it relates to sustainability, we continue to see organizations invest in sustainability to kind of monitor carbon impact. Certainly policies and training are other areas of focus as it relates to the regulatory environment. The tax function is, interestingly, if you look at these stats, I thought the biggest takeaway here is that that third bullet where we're integrating tax resources into making supply chain decisions. I see a lot of organizations that do that, and they're usually upper market, global companies. I do not see a lot of organizations in what I would traditionally call the middle market doing that. It is an area that I think that's good to see, and from my vantage point, it's very different skill sets and disciplines to bring tax into tax supply chain into a traditional supply chain conversation, but it does make especially for global supply chains, a whole lot of sense. Start to think about transfer pricing and VAT and all the tariffs and duties, and it needs to inform the decision. It may not drive the decision, but when you can narrow down decisions on what your supply chain should look like from a network perspective, or even on an individual particular item that you may be purchasing, those tax implications do matter. So bringing those folks in the conversation is always good in my view. I feel like most tax departments in these businesses actually want to be more strategic and are very willing and able to do that. So that was certainly a good thing to see. So this is the selfish question out of the survey, right? Is how do you guys use consulting in your organization in terms of outside third-party services? And sales and operations planning has and will continue to be very, very, very much a hot topic as it relates to that, particularly with the current environment. As you can imagine, the uncertainty of the supply side and demand. S&OP always has merit, and this just gives it that much more boost in terms of importance for organizations, and that will continue to be a very high priority. Monitoring supplier risk is another one, and I'd say historically, this is one where I actually don't see a lot of services, third-party services in the space. It's usually contained within an organization, but there are certainly a number of organizations looking to have an augmentation in that area, often supplanted with tools that can help predict supply chain disruption and monitor risks. We actually have one that I mentioned earlier that uses AI, and you can kind of see those secondary and tertiary suppliers and how that might impact, if you had an earthquake in the Philippines, how that might impact you at the end of the day. So those types of tools are out there and being deployed as a service. And then certainly planning and procurement, just, I think those are constants as well. It's not as common as the others in terms of a service, but we certainly see that. So those are the key takeaways from the survey that we issued. Certainly tariffs are the number one topic of the moment, and have been for, gosh, 3 or 4 months at this point. And today we've got Mark Ludwig with us. There he is. Mark is our trade and tariffs lead here at RSM, and we thought, it'd be great to give you guys an overview of the benchmark survey, but it would also be good to just spend a few minutes and talk about tariffs, because it is such a key topic. So we've got some content that Mark's going to present, and then when we bring the panel up, we'll get their thoughts too around a couple of areas on the tariffs. So thank you, Mark.
Okay, nobody gave me any instructions, so I'm going pretty loose here. So thank you for all for joining us today on behalf of RSM, on behalf of the supply chain consulting practice, which Casey leads, the trade and tariff advisory practice, which I lead. Look forward to the discussion this afternoon. And I guess the first question out of the gate that I would have, and it's hard to see because the lights are pretty bright, at least focusing on me here, just by a quick raise of hands, some audience participation. Are you feeling tariff impact, or will you be feeling tariff impact? Yeah. That applies to your personal life too, not just your business life, right? Because somebody's paying those tariffs. And I will tell you, it's not China. It's not Britain. It's not Germany. It's the American importer, the American consumer. It is, of course, meant to, for various reasons, we've heard why the tariffs have been applied in such a bold and rapid fashion since the new administration took office. So this is not meant, of course, to get into any political stances on how you feel about tariffs and what the intention of tariffs are. It's to talk about what's going on, what's the current and latest on them, and what you might be able to do to get your arms around them and manage them so the impact on at least your commercial operations perhaps is lessened, and you can figure out the best way to navigate through the opportunities as well as the risks that these tariffs now present. Now, I've been waiting 30-some years of my professional career to have a conversation like this, because I've been hawking trade and tariff services in supply chain as well for all those years when the average U.S. tariff rate was less than 2% on average. Suddenly they're in double digits and everybody wants to talk to me. So happy to be finally getting a little bit of limelight, but at the same time, really when I think about the strategies that we used just 6 months ago when tariffs were still very low single digits, if not zero for a lot of goods, nothing's really changed. What has changed is the tariff rate itself, but all the strategies, all the tactics, all the issues are still there, which is easy for me to basically continue on the conversation. What's happened is the external environment around us has shifted. So let's go through what has changed. There is something called an MFN rate, most favored nation rate. That is your normal tariff that you would actually see. That's the tariff rate the U.S. has decided to apply, and it's bound by those rates and its membership in the World Trade Organization, as are all those other countries, 100 and I think 60 some of them are all members of the World Trade Organization. They've all agreed to have a most favored nation rate. Those are rates that are applied for countries that they deem, each country itself looks at around the world and says, we want good relations with that other country, so we're going to give them a most favored nation tariff rate. They lodge it with the World Trade Organization, and it becomes part of the standard rate. So if you look in what's known as column 1 of the harmonized tariff schedule of the United States, you'll find those rates. You'll also find a lot of footnotes and a lot of caveats in a column 2 rate, special rate, and other additional definitions of what tariff applies. There's 3 types of tariffs. One tariff is an ad valorem, which is basically your percent. Another is a specific rate, which is perhaps cents or dollars on a pound, or a diameter of wire gets 5 cents per millimeter, whatever it is, alloy content, whatever. And then you got a compound rate, which is your ad valorem plus a specific rate. All the tariffs that have been applied since the new administration took office are all ad valorem rates under executive orders. These are the statutes that have been used. The most important thing on this page isn't necessarily the type of tariffs that have been applied. It's the first line that basically says the U.S. Congress has the constitutional power to set tariffs under specific laws. The president, the executive branch, can impose tariffs, particularly in cases involving national security or in economic emergencies. Well, national security and economic emergencies were exactly the rationale used to apply Section 232, Section 301 tariffs. And you might notice there's something that's not on this page, and it's the international emergency economic powers ability to impose tariffs. And the reason it's not there is because it's never been used before to regulate tariffs. So this is the first time out of the gate where EIPA is the acronym, another awkward alphabet soup from the government, but EIPA is used now to set up these tariff rates, including more recently the reciprocal tariffs that you've learned about just last month on Liberation Day. So you're not going to be able to see all that from where you're sitting. I'm not going to ask you to try to interpret it. But what I will say is this highlights it's complex, right? You've heard rates 10%, 25%, 125%, 60%, 20%, whatever the rates are. Those are all the different rates that are floating around in all this. So, as you see, the way we've structured this is we've got the specific type. These are examples. It's not everything, right? There's other things that aren't on here. But this is just sort of meant to give you a flavor of what's happened. We've got the rationale, we've got the targeted goods, we've got examples listed out, targeted countries, the effective dates, the tariff rates, the durations. Importantly, look at the duration. There's no fixed duration on any of these. This basically is subject to either the next administration. If they want to continue, they can continue. If they want to change, they can change. It sits in the executive branch to make these decisions, unless Congress claws back some of that delegated authority, which doesn't seem likely in the next 2 years. Then you got the retaliation, and you also have key considerations. Those of you in this part of the country probably have heard of something called a foreign trade zone. It is one of the key economic development vehicles or mechanisms that can be used to defer, lower, exempt tariffs. On some of these new tariff, under these executive orders, foreign trade zones don't work for you. You can still use your foreign trade zone. You can still get the break from the normal tariff, the MFN rate, but you're not going to get it from these new tariffs. And oh, by the way, there's no drawback on these new tariffs either. On Section 232, the steel and aluminum tariffs, an interesting thing that we've never seen before either, is the intended level of seriousness of the administration to basically say the minimum they want to go is the maximum in terms of penalty. So there's no mitigating factors. I made a mistake. I put the wrong tariff code on my customs declaration. I factored the wrong amount that I owe you, government. It doesn't matter. If it's a mistake, it's just the same as if it's fraud. So the maximum penalty allowed under law is the domestic value of the imported merchandise. So not sure, in a high tariff rate environment, you're paying 25% additional tariffs. You got to pay that tariff, and if you get hit with a fine or penalty, there's no mitigation you can have, and you're going to be paying not only for the purchase of the goods, you're paying the 25% tariff on the goods plus the normal rate if you have a normal rate, and the potential risk of paying the domestic value of the goods because you misclassified something or you didn't determine the value of the goods properly. Whatever the reason is, it's basically deemed to be fraud. So, interesting things. The other part is some of these have no exclusion processes associated with them. There's so many different nuances and a lot of details that have to be interpreted as you go through this. So I'll stop talking about what happened, why it happened, and I'll start talking about what can you do about it. Well, a lot of programs out there exist. Remember I said 5-6 months ago I was promoting and helping companies with programs such as bonded warehouses, foreign trade zones, temporary import bonds, tactical and strategic efforts such as valuation of goods. Don't forget, these are ad valorem additional tariffs that are coming, that are hitting. So if you can lower your declared value, if you import something yesterday at 100, if you can find a way to import it today at 90, that tariff pain is lessened because you have a lower ad valorem tariff result. You have tariff classification engineering that can be done, and you have origin planning. Everybody's talking about, let's just go make it in Vietnam. Well, if you saw Vietnam's also getting hit with reciprocal tariffs, how about Thailand? Thailand's also getting reciprocal tariffs. How about Malaysia? Also reciprocal tariffs. So there's almost no escape. What you're escaping potentially is the rate. You're going to a potentially lower rate, but pretty much every country is feeling some sort of a tariff in this day and age. There's even uninhabited islands that have been hit with reciprocal tariffs. I'm not sure why, but that's what happened. So navigate this carefully, but there are opportunities out there. These are some of them, not all. One of the things that we've done is we've challenged all of our clients and companies we interact with is, do you even know what you spend in tariffs? Did you know what you spent in tariffs 5 months ago, 3 months ago, last month? Most companies, the answer is, maybe this much, maybe that much. Nobody's quite sure, and for the most part. And the reason being is it is a bit of a black box. It's buried in your cost of goods sold. It's usually something that paid by your customs broker through your own accounts that they have access to because they have a power of attorney, by the way, if you didn't know that. If you engage a customs broker, you give them power of attorney, they file basically federal tax returns, i.e. customs entry forms, in your name. I have my personal taxes done. A lot of us do. We either do them on TurboTax or other tax software. But if you get them done by a professional preparer, like an RSM does, RSM doesn't sign as you, the taxpayer. You sign as the taxpayer. They just sign as the preparer. Brokers are signing as the company. It's a big difference. Reason being is because there's such a massive amount of volume, but there's still 40-some elements of information every customs entry form has to have. Get one of those things wrong and you're importing steel and aluminum, big problems. Get one of those things wrong, importing things from China, that could be plastics, could be toys, could be whatever. You could have a serious impact as well because customs may not accept what you've submitted, or they may challenge what's on those declarations, particularly if it's different from what it was a few months ago on the exact same transaction. So be careful navigating. One of the things we've done is this trade profiler. We've created a tool that basically accesses your filings directly with the government, puts it into a Power BI-based platform, and provides you with visibility to what's happening. Breaks through the black box, allowing you to see the detail relief, the tariff part, or the duty part of your COGS, right? That is critically important because what gets measured gets done. If you're not measuring tariffs and you weren't measuring tariffs, I think the last few months are a great example of why you probably should be doing so. The last part of this, there's a little hard to see lower right box, but that's a screenshot of one of the additional dashboards we've added recently, and that is a tariff modeler to basically say, if you were importing the last 12 months, these detailed things from these vendors and these quantities and these declared values paying this amount in tariffs, take that, project it based on the tariff jumping to 50% or 35% or whatever you're going to scale it to. There is a bar that you click on where you think your tariff is going to be landing in general, and you can forecast what the impact of your business is based on what you've actually done, not based on some Excel spreadsheeting that somebody on the team or you've asked AI to do for you, but your actual transactional activity projected forward to give you a sense of what your impact's going to be. That's a great way to start out of the gate. I think that's the end of this part, so I think we're going to transition now to some of the interaction with our panels, and my colleague here is going to help us take that next step. There's a booth we have as a attendee here. We have some of these flyers like this that you just saw, some of those screens. We're in 217. Stop by and see us if you'd like. Happy to talk with you.
Are you clapping because I walked up here or because Mark's really smart? I agree. Working with people like Mark and Casey is what is awesome about being part of a big firm, and the thought leadership they put together, this stuff that you're seeing. It makes me look smart when I'm going to talk to you guys because it's relevant data. It's not anecdotal based on my client base of 20 clients. It's market-wide data, it's international data, so it's super relevant. But what I'd like to do right now is bring our panel up, and we're going to facilitate a little discussion. You guys can, that's your cue. Moonmoon and Shannon and Vern, if you guys want to join us up on stage here. But want to be able to kind of dovetail this conversation into real-world application. Have these folks speak to what both the tariff implications and the supply chain implications, how those dovetail, how those interact together, what they're doing to accommodate those things. Real quick, my background, I know Casey introduced me briefly. I'm a partner in our audit practice here in San Antonio. I've been involved with SAMA for over 20 years on their board and executive committee. So super appreciative of the opportunity to be here and to share this information with you guys. But our panel today, obviously we have Mark, who you just heard from. We have Moonmoon Rathod, who is with Amazon. We have Shannon Chamberlain with Millennium Steel. And we have Vern Teichroeb who is a consultant with the Association of Supply Chain Management. First thing I'm going to do is allow them to just give a brief introduction and background on themselves so you guys have a basis of understanding and questions.
Awesome. Thank
you. Go ahead,
you.
Moonmoon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Moonmoon Rathod. I'm with Amazon. I'm a senior supply chain manager in inbound operations, inbound logistics. I'm also on the board of ASCM, Association of Supply Chain Management here in San Antonio. And prior to this, I was involved in a lot of different logistics projects at another firm. I have now around, I didn't want to mention Apple, but yeah. I've 10 years of experience in supply chain. I call myself a supply chain nerd. And some things I live by in current times are, we have AI, we have all these smart tech, but the humans are still at the center of everything that we do. Go ahead, Vern.
Go ahead, Vern.
Hi, my name is Vern Teichroeb. I'm wearing 3 hats here today. First, 41 years in industry, mostly aerospace, a little bit of automotive, all of it in supply chain, so I'm kind of got the battle scars. Been a member of ASCM, the Association for Supply Chain Management, for 30 plus years, and some of our board members are here, and and Moonmoon's on our board, and we train and educate, a not-for-profit organization that trains and educates in supply chain management. And then my last hat is the last 4 years I've been teaching full-time in some of the universities in San Antonio, including UTSA and St. Mary's. And so I have a kind of a student perspective once in a while about what they're bringing to the classroom. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shannon Chamberlain. I work with Millennium Steel of Texas. We are a supplier to Toyota. So we do supply all the metal that goes through the Toyota facility. I have worked with Millennium Steel since the original launch in 2006. I left briefly in 2019 to go about and do some things that I was interested in doing. And I've been back for about 3 years in the quality manager capacity.
Very good. Thank you, guys. We're grateful to have you here. You guys obviously know Mark he's super smart with all things tariffs, I think is his description. First question, and you guys hop into this however you see fit. But to dovetail the two topics, how have the recent tariff changes impacted your strategies around resourcing and inventory management, particularly in terms of supplier diversification, demand planning, lead times, cost control, et cetera?
Do you want to take it? Okay, I'll take it. So we have like dedicated trade compliance teams at Amazon that monitor updates in terms of real time. We also use external advisors because there are so many changes happening on almost daily basis. I can't even say weekly, but yeah, almost daily basis. But internally, we have a lot of like cross-functional meetings to align our strategy. We have our 3-year strategy, our 5-year strategy, and all of those are out of the lane right now. So currently we are strategizing around, we are looking around different programs, a lot of like our direct import programs, like how can we minimize costs. A lot of our freight was moving from, that was going into Canada from US. Basically anything being imported from China to US and then into Canada, that is all being revised. So there are a lot of strategic decisions that are being made as to where do we see ourselves with all these tariff changes. So in current times, I'll say we are using help from external advisors, and also we have internal meetings to.
Pretty good. Yeah, it sounds like substantial modifications. The best laid plans don't always work out the way you intend, so
Yes.
it's adjusting on the fly is what it sounds
Absolutely.
like.
Yes, yeah.
Very good. Vern, what about yourself? What have you seen in the market?
Yeah, my view is, from a business perspective, is a little old. I've been out of industry for 4 years, and I was thinking about that. We had a government contract here at Port San Antonio, and your first thing you say is, well, your dollars are spent in the United States, so the tariffs don't impact that. But the components we purchased were, I'm thinking mostly machine goods, so they were U.S. origin, but the materials probably didn't come from the U.S. So we would see that as a raw material increase due to tariffs that would filter through and get onto the machine goods that get on the aircraft that we happen to be servicing. From a student perspective, my mature students, the graduate students that come to class, are all working, and they're bringing stories to me this week saying that they've canceled. This one particular student has said his business has canceled all purchase orders to China, and anything that hasn't gone over the rail, if you're familiar with the Incoterms, anything that hasn't gone over the rail, they're just stopping shipment. They're just saying, I'm walking away from that. He didn't say that there were penalties, so I'm not, it depends how you negotiate that purchase contract. But then anything that's going over the rail is then subject to those tariffs when they get here. And if the news that I heard today, the first ship actually got here today with items on it that will be tariffed for the first time. So if that's truth, then he was saying they'll pay the duties, they will put it on the shelf at the store, they will exhaust that, and they're nearshoring from China to India, to your point about still have tariffs, they're just a different level of tariff. And so then they're integrating that price into our cost of goods, not we, the consumer's cost of goods. And so we will eat that price, but it'll be lower from India than it will be from China.
And I think that goes right along with what Mark alluded to earlier, is somebody's paying for it, and that's going to trickle down into our cost. And Shannon, with this question, I'm going to modify it for you just a little bit. You guys buy all your steel and aluminum from the U.S. and Canada, correct?
Yeah, we have one facility in Canada and then 5 in the United States.
Okay, so with that in mind, compared to your competitors who outsource their materials or other companies specifically, do you think these tariffs will affect your competitive advantage in terms of cost, supply chain stability, and compliance with new regulations, and maybe don't have to look as much at supplier diversification?
On the steel side, I don't know that it'll affect us quite as much. On the aluminum side, we have already had one of our aluminum suppliers come to us and let us know that there will be some changes in the tariffs. And just to, so Toyota does negotiate all contracts with our mill suppliers, and our cost is guaranteed for a year on the steel side, but on the aluminum side, it changes month to month. So they are in negotiations with the aluminum suppliers that are experiencing the tariffs at the moment. So those they haven't hit us quite yet. I'm sure maybe in the next couple months we may see a raise in that. But as far as our steel suppliers are concerned, it may not be until next year if it does affect us.
That's interesting, because they're obviously bearing the risk on their end and hedging the sales quantity to you in some form or fashion. So yeah, I would imagine once those are up, then that's when the rubber's going to hit the road for you guys.
Right. So it's important for us to start monitoring and tracking that.
Very good. So that delays it at best, but at least allows you time to plan and address. Very good. Another question for the entire group, and field it as you see fit. Can you elaborate on specific technologies that you guys are using that are being prioritized in your supply chain, and how are these technologies expected to impact what you're doing on a daily basis? And that could be, anything from AI to other components that you guys are implementing.
Go ahead, start again.
Yeah. So currently we are focused on a couple different areas, starting from advanced analytics for demand forecasting for planning purposes. Then we have automation in our fulfillment centers. When I say automation, for an example, like robots moving around in the warehouse, picking or sorting instead of human forces. And then the third part is AI, AI, to reduce a lot of manual calculations. A lot of our reports models are now being automated. There are also some tools internal at Amazon, developed by AWS, that are currently being tested in-house to see if it works out for us.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, all of you, the companies, especially here in San Antonio and around South Central Texas, are coming to the schools and saying at least two things that they want from students, graduating students. They want an understanding of machine learning and their ability to write algorithms to do that, and an understanding of AI and how to use AI in business at various different levels. I think many of you probably use descriptive AI to say, give me a policy for whatever, right? And you've got it 2-3 seconds. I wouldn't say it's the bleeding edge of that, but the new stuff that's coming out to us is the AI agent, and maybe Casey was talking about the data inside your four walls, and what's coming out of that is that these AI agents can use all of your internal data, all of your forecasting information, your call center information, all that information, and stay within the firewall, not take your stuff out and not take other stuff in, but just say, with my own big data, how do I use my big data to make decisions? Casey, you talked on the supply side, but the discussion I'm seeing is really on the forecasting side. Forecast error, where are we going, what are we doing, what's the method, how can AI help, and that sort of thing.
Very good. Shannon?
So a lot of the things that we're looking at as far as the production in our own building is automated equipment, how to make our processes more efficient. less strenuous and safer for our employees in the building. So the less steps we have to take to receiving the material to shipping it out the door obviously is, a cost save all the way around. And some of the things that we are doing is in our Indiana plant, we have an automated crane system that we're looking at putting into our Texas plant. We're also looking at automated forklift or like AGV type of vehicles to move the material around. We do have different software programs that our IT group is working on to, as you guys have discussed, collect all this data and then present it in a format that makes it easier to understand it and help us to make the decisions that we need to make as far as sourcing and supplying and different things of that nature.
Very good. So, sounds like AI is super relevant, which makes me concerned as a parent, because I have 2 kids in college, and I'm like, is their degree even going to be relevant if it's not AI based? And AI apparently can also be used for more than just like planning a vacation itinerary, I guess, right? Got a couple more questions for the panel, then I'm going to open it up to the audience. So be thinking of your questions here as well. So, given the dynamic nature of the tariff environment, and just from a global perspective, changing daily, been documented very well. And Mark, I want you to comment on this one as well, just based on the broad client base that you get to deal with. But in terms of, this is for each of you, can you share how your organizations stay up to date on these changes? What does that inflow look like aside from following Donald Trump on X? How are you guys bringing that information into your organizations, and who are you relying on for that information?
I would say for us, it's our trade compliance team that controls it. And also, I think I mentioned earlier, we also use some external advisors on this topic. So that is how we keep ourselves up to date. Also, I think as a company, we are now more intentional about how and where are, the flow of our goods, how and where are we routing our volume from.
Sure.
Earlier, something like the example I gave earlier, something that was going from China to Canada, now it is being tariffed twice, for example, right? Tariffed once when it's imported into US and then from US to Canada. So now we are more intentional of how do we truly want, I think a lot of our strategy now involves tariff, we definitely keep tariff in mind.
It's not just cost of transport,
yes,
it's the added cost of the
agreed.
tariffs on top of that.
Agreed.
Yeah, I was thinking about the answer. I'm going back to something Mark kind of referred to. The last organization I was given, 2 organizations back, I was given the opportunity to, we were on a sourcing team, and my boss said, I got a job for you, and your job is to outsource customs brokerage for our company. We had an internal team, and I said, I don't even know how to spell customs, so it was learned by fire hose. Anyway, that decision was made purely on risk. We saw that the changes were so numerous and volatile, and just our ability to have internal staff that could keep on top of all of that, we saw that was a risk, and the idea of that every wrong transaction is fraud really is scary when you're looking at your own risk mitigation strategies. And so we did outsource that to a third party, and then your risk mitigation strategy is to give the risk to somebody else. So they did that. Sure, they did it for a fee, but we felt comfortable, yay, verily, right? And they were professionals. They had a large team, and I slept better at night. Yeah.
I bet. Shannon?
So for us, our parent company is a global company, and so we, stay more up to date with them on a global level. So
Sure.
all the different areas that we're dealing with. And I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Now that makes sense. I mean, the way they deploy information is going to be from the top
Right.
down,
Yeah.
because they're looking at overall company strategy and
Right,
pushing
it
that
just kind
down.
of funnels down. And then being at a global company, we also go out to all the other facilities, kind of benchmarking, looking at what they're doing, anything that is for improvement that we can bring back to our different facilities, different things like that.
Good. Good. And Mark, what are you seeing in your client base? I know you're having a ton of conversations. Probably your word output is probably tenfold what it is on a normal year. But what are you seeing within the conversations you're having? How are those people gathering that info?
Well, they tried to follow traditional media in the early days, but early days being January, as recent as January, February. You know, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Washington Post, and all that. The way it's worked lately, Truth Social is the way to be, because those thoughts, everything that's occurred, everything that the way it's played out, is directly from what the president believes and what announces. So some have basically said, why even bother? You can get the additional context, the background from the Financial Times and all the traditional news media, business media, but the reality is the announcement, the next big announcement, the things that are happening are coming out. Even in the past 2 days we've seen, and it's not always correct, right? It's always either further revised or changed or walked back. You saw a difference of opinion expressed by the Secretary of Treasury. He said we weren't talking with China, and now he's flying to Switzerland to talk with China. So literally in 24 hours or so, it's changing that fast. Companies, most of the companies we deal with, and even the largest companies, don't all have internal trade compliance departments, right? So it's usually somebody in the executive leadership team or somebody in the department head who's doing what they can to keep abreast. If you're engaged with a larger freight carrier or broker, they may have their own way to communicate changes, but even they are highly dependent upon accuracy because they're the one filing for you. And U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which is where it's all coming together, right? They're the ones who we rely on guidance from them about how these executive orders gets translated into on-the-ground realities at the port of entry. And there's something called the cargo messaging service that U.S. Customs uses to communicate out to the community, the trading community, how things are going to actually work. Right now, that has become a lifeline for those in the industry trying to keep pace about how Customs is going to take what the executive orders as they read and interpret it. And then you got other agencies, Department of Commerce, U.S. Trade Representative, International Trade Commission, et cetera, all involved in the policy and the implementation of the policy and the application. So there's so many different parties involved. So I would say there is the starting point, which is the Truth Social and the official positions of the White House on whitehouse.gov. The rubber meets the road aspects, that happens from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So if you're on either sides of those, you should be able to work your way through it, at least in terms of keeping current. Everything in between is just sausage being made in the process.
Very good. I'm going to open this up to audience questions, and I assume these mics in the aisle are hot, or they are hot. Very good. What brave soul? There we go. We got one.
Come on down.
Howdy. My name is Ben. I'm with a company called Woven Metal Products here in Texas. We're a custom metal manufacturer. My question is more about the new landscape of tariffs and the effect it has on U.S. manufacturing. So during COVID, we saw a phase of reshoring, nearshoring, and I think it settled off and became more friendshoring, where we're getting products not necessarily from China, but from Canada, Mexico, Korea. In this new landscape that we're involved in, do you see it more do you see more of the supply chain focusing on U.S., Texas manufacturing? And then will it be sustainable? Will it have teeth this go around?
You want to take that?
Are you talking to me? Okay. I would say we do a very good job of trying to purchase locally within the United States when we can. And that is whenever we do research and look into different suppliers, that is one of our top priorities, both minority ownership and being domestic within the United States. I wouldn't say, at least at the very moment, I believe it'll be sustainable. We'll just have to see how it kind of comes in the future with the different things that we do purchase within the United States. And on the metal side of it, we are basically, Toyota does direct who we purchase the material from, so we don't really have a say as to, we'll purchase from suppliers A, B, and C as opposed to, E, F, and G. That decision is made for us.
Yeah, I'm hearing two conversations on this, and there's probably 1,000, but one of them is, so the intent of the tariff, my understanding, is to turn that spend, American company spend, within the country, keep it in the country. And so can American companies respond quickly enough to get kind of ahead of the tariff so that we have somewhere to buy? So that's, first, is the infrastructure there? Then the question of existing infrastructure, because you said you have, just use you as an example, you said you have one metal supplier in Canada, and I think you said 5 in the United States?
Correct.
And so what I'm hearing is when that business, where there is capability, existing capability in the United States, and the offshore purchasers turn onshore, that the typical supply chain problem, right? Supply and demand. Now the supply skyrockets, the demand isn't there, which pushes the price up, right? And so then you say, even the local price will be increased, and this isn't gouging like, there's a 145% tariff, let's bump up our price 100% because we can, but this is really a supply and demand issue where the existing U.S. organizations that have the product or the service that we want are getting hit hard and can't keep up.
Thanks, awesome.
This is a good question. It's one that we get a lot of, often. And I would say, you mentioned that after COVID that, there was some nearshoring going on. And I do think that happened, but I think there was a lot of talk and a lot less action around that. And that's been going on for years and years. There are a number of companies right now that are evaluating bringing back manufacturing into the U.S. It's specifically related to those that have or can be low labor for manufacturers. So those are the ones that tend to make sense. I've seen some scenarios too where they say, look, we have to partner with our Chinese partner, and they're basically we're going to keep the same partner. They're going to make some investments in the U.S. It's to their benefit too. They're going to lose this business, right? So they're going to become our JV in the U.S. They're going to help us start this plant up. They're going to run it potentially, and that is the plan. And even to the point where they know that they will operate at a lower margin potentially, and they're okay with that because it takes the risk out. Alternatively, if it's a higher labor input item, I haven't seen this yet, but I predict that even with the tariffs, that will unless something changes, that we'll see demand in Mexico. We'll see shift to Mexico and U.S.-owned companies in Mexico producing it, which we've seen for years, but I think it could just be a little bit more momentum.
Yeah, let me add to that, Casey. Love the question. Easy question to ask, hard question to answer because it's very sectoral. But to the point on Mexico, I wanted to add, Mexico arguably, I think both on paper and in actuality, has the most extensive free trade agreement network in the world. Mexico right now is in the catbird seat if it can take advantage of the disruption in the U.S., the uncertainty, the potential for exploring alternative manufacturing at scale outside of China. Mexico has access to the most complex and comprehensive trade agreement that's ever existed on earth, and that is the USMCA, which probably is going to get renegotiated anyway. Boards don't make decisions on capital investment that cost millions, if not tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, based on a tariff that has no forecasted specific duration. So is the alternative is a place like Mexico, because think about the jobs that potentially the intent of the tariffs is to create U.S. manufacturing or rebirth U.S. manufacturing. That is going to be inherently sectoral. It'll be also very pocketed in certain parts of the country. I don't see places like California necessarily being the next manufacturing boom. It's more likely to be the industrial heartland, which is, I think, intended as well in the South. But Mexico, especially with the use of AI and robotics, I think is sitting in a very beneficial position. So we are leaning in to present and offer services and solutions that are intended to support such. There may be some secondary effect in manufacturing in the United States, but I had a colleague tell me today that there's an expectation that any foreign investment in the United States in terms of manufacturing capacity is going to look very much like foreign manufacturing that U.S. companies have done overseas, and that's around toll manufacturing services and maybe some light contract manufacturing services where there's very limited executive presence, mostly just low-end assembly operations, that the U.S. could potentially be a contract toll manufacturing location, but not necessarily much beyond that. So maybe it will serve the purpose of employing Americans, but are those the jobs that really are, that we're looking to do? And secondly, what is the role of robotics and automation in the mix of all this? So there's going to be reshoring, no doubt. I think it's going to look more Mexican than American, though, in my own personal view.
You may have got more than you bargained for with that question. That's awesome. I think we got time for one more. I don't want to be the guy standing in between you and a happy hour. Is there one more person that wants to drop a question to the panel? Apparently I won't be standing between you and a happy hour then.
But we have a couple more announcements. First off, let's thank our presenters and our panelists, please. And good job moderating, Pat. Pat Lonsdale is a treasurer of our board of directors at SAMA. RSM is an annual sponsor. We appreciate them for all their support. They did a number of wonderful webinars earlier in the spring, in February, on tariffs and those sorts of things, and very well attended, and we appreciated the opportunity to share that with all of our members. So thank you for that. So we have a drawing some of you are interested in, I know. There's a PS5 up here that is part of the drawing today, and I just want to point out one thing. Shannon from Millennium Steel, wonderful, but I went to her late on this panel, and I really appreciate, Shannon, you joining us on a short notice. And if you look out there and see that big, beautiful tundra that's sitting over there, everything metal and aluminum on it pretty much went through Millennium Steel here in San Antonio, Texas. So good job, Shannon and team. So our friends from Bexar County are here. Wonderful David Marquez, Deborah Carter from Economic Development. They have supplied all of the prizes today that have been part of this conference series. And so we're going to ask them to do a drawing and say a word if you would like to. Go ahead. Do you want to say something?
Well, thank you, Pam. I appreciate it very much, and all the other folks that are here. Bexar County's been a very strong supporter of the local manufacturing industry for many, many years, and we're grateful to be here. Thanks for all of you, because you're the ones that make it happen. We have our booth here next to the kind of social area. Come by, because we have a whole bunch of super amazing, wonderful door prizes to give away. So So please don't leave. You might get an adult beverage and walk away with a TV or a Yeti or something really cool. This isn't cheap stuff. This is really nice stuff that we're grateful to provide, including this amazing PS5 that we're just about to give away. So thank you. Let's see. Hey, that's me. No, I'm just kidding. All right, you ready? The number is, got your numbers ready? 527. 527. Winner? Oh, right here in front. All right. PS5 winner. Did you need a PS5? Because if not, I'll be happy to take it for you.
Okay, it passes. So another round of applause for our presenters and our panelists. Thank you all. Thank you, Pat.
You bet.
Thank you, RSM. And Pat?
And quickly, I know the biggest frustration around the tariffs and the supply chain management is just the dynamic environment, not knowing how to plan for it. That trade profiler that Mark alluded to, if that's of interest to you, we have Chelsea down here who can speak with you about it, and myself, Casey, and Mark, happy to as well. Just find us. We'll be mingling around the happy hour, but greatly appreciate your time and attention here, and thank you to our panelists for volunteering your time as well. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.